Welcome back to another video, everybody. Today we're going to be going over the 1-0 loss to Bournemouth that happened yesterday. What I wanted to do originally was kind of like a film study breakdown, but as of the time of recording, Spurs Play still hadn't put up their full match video, so we won't be able to do that today. Hopefully we'll be able to do that next week and weeks moving on in the future, but for today we're just kind of gonna go over my notes that I took throughout the game, the player ratings, some of the stats, and kind of just break it down. Obviously it was a really bad loss, like it wasn't a bad loss in the terms of like we just got destroyed, but we definitely got outplayed for the whole match, and that was really discouraging. But I think there was a couple things that we could take away from the performance and say that if these things get better, then we'll be in a much better spot. Obviously, the first two games were very, very good, so it's not like I'm not trying to set Thomas Frank on fire here. I think that it was a bad game, but I think we'll bounce back from it with a couple tweaks. So let's start out by looking at the stats. Or actually, one thing I wanted to look at first. So this kind of tells the story of the match. Key takeaways. Bournemouth's pressing was incredible. Bournemouth's pressing was the main thing that was causing us issues throughout the match. Secondly, we had no creation, no build-up, nobody to drop deep and break lines with their passing. We had a lot of issues also with progressing the ball through dribbling. We just really had no way to move the ball up the pitch. And third, once we did move the ball up the pitch, we had nobody that could take their chances. Those are kind of the three of the bigger things that hurt us throughout the game. So I wanted to start out with this screenshot here from Nathan A. Clark I've never actually seen this before, but Mark StatsBot. We'll have to look out for that. But he has a passing map from minutes 1 through 57, showing exactly how conservative we were throughout the match. So you can see here, and then this attributing XG map showing that throughout the whole match we had just 0.31 and Bournemouth had 1.45, and you can see the progression of Bournemouth just continually minute after minute making good chances, and that kind of resonates with the notes that I took as well. I have in my notes, obviously they scored their goal in the 4th minute, which was a well-taken goal. I don't think there was a ton that was necessarily wrong with that goal, but it was a well-taken goal by Bournemouth nonetheless. It was just kind of like early in the game, and sometimes that just happens. You're just not keyed in, which is a problem potentially, but I don't think it's, there were bigger issues in the game, in my opinion. But so going back to Bournemouth's ascendancy throughout the game, really good chances from a lot of their players, and they didn't have the majority of the possession early on. Actually, they did have the majority of the possession through the first 15 minutes, and then slowly we started to get more of the possession, but it wasn't really good possession. When Bournemouth had it, they looked like they were going to be creating chances, and you can see that obviously from this XG chart here. Once they had the ball, they were really deadly on the counterattack. It's surprising that they didn't get more than one goal, and a big part of that, I think, was Vicario. So we'll look at that when we go over our player ratings, because he had some really nice saves. But we just really did not look good when we had the ball. And as you can see, we had 61% possession, but only 0.19 XG throughout the whole match. So actually, this chart here was more favorable to us, because I think this is probably more accurate in some ways. And as you can see here, this shot map, this shot here from Lucas Bergvall was the first shot on target we had, and it took until the 68th minute for us to get a shot on target, and this shot was actually only 0.06 XG, 0.22 XG on target. It was just really, really a dreadful performance, and like we said, no creativity, no build-up. Bournemouth was destroying us with their press, and I want to touch on that real quick, because it's not just that Bournemouth was doing something extraordinary, or we were really playing into that. In some ways we were, because of the lineup that Thomas Frank chose, and I think he got it wrong. We'll go over that in a second, but Bournemouth uh, was doing what Bournemouth does, as we can see here. So Bournemouth last season, I was trying to find stats from this season, but apparently it's just too fresh to get any real good data. But at least for what I could find or what's available. But anyways, so Bournemouth last season in the 92nd percentile for top 5 or top 7 leagues around the world. 92nd percentile in pressing. This is just what Bournemouth does. Under Iraola, like they are fantastic at pressing, as you can see here. And then also, I was looking to see if we could get any better data to prove that. And obviously, last season in the Premier League, the best pressers via PPDA, which is passes per defensive action, which is probably the best metric available, at least to track pressing and track how intense the pressing is by opposition sides. And in the Premier League last season, Bournemouth, as you can see, 9.9 passes per defensive action, which led all of the Premier League. So this is what Bournemouth does. So in some ways, you can't say that we're poor because of it. Or let me rephrase that. This is what Bournemouth does, and we did not do a good enough job of beating Bournemouth's press and doing the things that we needed to do to nullify their press in the first place. So a big part of that, I want to go over here and show our player positions. And a big part of that was the personnel that Thomas Frank chose. So we just scroll up a little bit. This midfield here of Paulinho, Sarr, and Bentancur just had no progression in it at all. It was definitely not the best lineup in terms of beating the press, right? Because you also have Spence and Porro, as you can see here, wanted to progress, but they also were trying to tuck in and kind of get a little bit of that possession. But then we really had no width. And what that equated to at times, there was a great screenshot, which maybe I'll put up on screen here if I can find it, that I saw on a TikTok from Ben Bowman. I also saw it floating around Twitter yesterday of the gaps that we were leaving in midfield. It was like the defensive line, the forward line, the midfield, just 30, 40 yards of space in between. And that was a big part of why we couldn't play out of it. Bournemouth was doing a good job of pushing up high and not leaving us any opportunities to push through the lines. And so to his credit, Vicario was composed on the ball, but he wasn't able to find anybody to get the ball to progress upfield. And because it ended up just oftentimes going into, actually, let's pull up our media here, tactics. Oftentimes, because it just kept going into from Vicario into Van de Ven or Van de Ven into Romero. And then we had nobody. Paulinho was kind of floating in here, but he wasn't really dominant in trying to get the ball. And then Bentancur was doing kind of a similar thing. Everyone was kind of just standing here in midfield. Sarr at times was actually pressing up higher and trying to make opportunities to pass the ball to. But it was just a lot of kind of this stuff going on here, and nobody to drop deep and grab the ball. And in the times that we had somebody coming and dropping deep, it just recycled into more of this. And there weren't a ton of, something we saw in the Man City game were these long balls to Kudus or Sarr in terms of that one goal. I think it was the first goal. And then knock-ons to players, moving down the field, knocking it on. Knock-ons into players who could then progress and move forward. We basically saw none of that in this match. And then so if we go back over here, we can see that passing chart. It was just back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. When it would go into Kudus would have to bring it back into Pedro Porro. There were a couple chances that were, obviously you can see here, Jed Spence into Brennan Johnson trying to run through. But Brennan, to talk about Brennan for a little bit, one thing with Brennan that's very frustrating, you could see a drastic improvement when Wilson Odebar came on, is he's just not very good at progressing the ball. Like, he's very, very good at running in behind and playing in space, but driving with the ball and playing any kind of one-on-one situation is just not his strong suit. And so we saw that a ton of times, him getting the ball and kind of just having to recycle, or the attack ends with dispossession or a bad pass, which he had a couple times. And so if we go back over here, we can see that's basically all we had for the first 57 minutes. And then we made some substitutions. In the 54th minute, it was Odebear and Bergvall coming on for Paulina and Brennan, and that made a huge impact at that point. It wasn't good enough to make a huge difference at that point, but we could see things starting to progress and the team start to look a little bit more settled and looking like they're going to make something happen with possession. So coming back over to it, a couple things I just wanted to touch on here. Passes. We obviously had quite a few passes. Quite a few inaccurate passes. And we weren't doing enough with our possession. So just to highlight it again, 0.19 XG, just not good enough at all. Just really, really bad. And so if we go back over and we look at our player ratings, right? So I think the biggest things to say, and this is atrocious. I don't think 6.1 for Lucas Bergvall is correct. I don't think a 6.4 for Wilson Odebear is correct. I don't think a 6.4 for Matisse Tell is correct. I thought all three of them offered really proactive, offered a lot once they came on and were really proactive in trying to make things happen. And there's a sequence towards the end of the match where you had a doggy with a great cutback to Wilson to the top of the box. Wilson just skies it. Great opportunity, though. That was only, I think, 0.05 XG, so not a ton. And then you got Tell with a brilliant chance, a great volley, which goes wide, really good setup, and a good shot for him, but really low XG. It would have been scenes if he would have made that. That was in the 90+2. But again, just not a high XG chance. And we really never had any high XG chances except for that Lucas Bergvall one, in the 68th minute. So overall, just really not a ton of positives to go away with this. I will say though, a couple players that did stick out to me. Vicario, again, having a really good match. Goals prevented half of a goal. You can't actually prevent a half a goal, but as far as goals prevented goes, that's actually really high. And saves, he had 5 saves, including 2 really, really important saves around the 53rd minute, right before we made our substitutions. 2 really key saves, which were both goal-saving saves, goal-saving stops. And he gets a 7.4, even though we lose 1-0 and we concede a goal. I think he was fantastic again. I think he's been looking really, really good on the ball this season, not offering you as much as you might want from some keepers, but like composed on the ball and not making mistakes. And then his shot stopping has been really, really good. Again, Van de Ven and Romero, a really solid performance. I don't think Pedro Porro deserved a 7.0. He didn't have a great game, in my opinion. Star was kind of anonymous. Paulina, nothing. Richie had a really bad first half. Wasn't able to hold on to the ball. Wasn't really able to play that support striker role to hold the ball up and make things happen as he had been doing previously in games. Kudus just non-existent. Something he was doing really well in previous matches was dropping deep and collecting the ball and driving with it. Just really didn't do much of that at all throughout this match. Overall, what do you say? It was just a really poor match overall, and so there just wasn't a ton of positives to look at. One thing I will say, so we touched on those things that the key takeaways, right? Bournemouth's pressing, our progression, and our chance our chance taking abilities, right? So if we go over to the progression part of things, so obviously we're in a situation here where if we had somebody, and let me just touch on this with the chance progression thing. So in the second half, we obviously made the changes of Bergvall did stay on, Bentancur did stay on, and for a while we had this single pivot and we had Brennan off, Odebear on, and Kudus. And so we had a lot more chances of Odebear with the ball, driving at that back line and trying to make things happen with his dribbling. Really good at that. He had a number of chances where he actually dribbled past players really well. So that was good to see. Burval again, and let's just head over here and we can see it on his heat map. Bergvall again, all over the place, trying to get into good positions. You can see here, obviously, this is where he was getting in a lot of times, trying to dictate things from here. Really good performance. And what you can see also from here is once we made those substitutions, look at the difference in average position. Just so far back, not making anything happen. You can see that that distance between the midfielders and the defense and the forward line when our starters were on the pitch compared to when the substitutions got on. Everyone pushed up way higher and was really trying to make things happen. And Matisse Tell, another person here in this position right there, I thought was really interesting in the way that he played the game because it was the first time we really saw him, at least in my recollection, playing as like a second striker. He definitely wasn't playing as like a creative number 10, but he was getting on the ball a lot in these positions, as you can see here, driving in from the left. So let's move over to the tactic board actually and show what he was doing, because at one point he came on for Sar, I believe it was. Yes, it was Sar. I was just checking the screen to make sure that was true. So he came on and we had this double pivot going on, but with Bergvall in these positions a lot and Tell in these positions. And he was kind of just getting the ball here, driving and playing in these positions here, kind of occupying this space here, while Wilson was doing a good job at occupying this space here. And then we had Spence moving over to the right, Porro coming off in the 70th minute, and with Udogie coming on, and Udogie coming up into these positions here, Odegaard driving, and you had Spence up here. So it's like we were doing some good things in the second half tactically, but still, we just really had no progression from these spaces in here to get the ball forward. Bentancur is just not really good at that. He's decent at carrying it, but he's definitely not really great at progressing the ball through passing. And similarly, Romero at times can be very good at that, especially with his passing from deep, but he just wasn't making those long balls in this match, and so that just kind of really hurt us with our overall lack of progression through passing. So what I think we could have done, and this is probably where if we were in a different situation, because here's our starting lineup, right? Just not much going on there. And that's a good lineup if you're going to be without the ball, because there's a lot of energy in that lineup. There's a lot of pressing and intensity, with Pop obviously doing his thing. And Paulinho, as we went over in the last game, is really good at that too. Same as Bentancur, same as Spence, Porro. A lot of intensity, but just not a lot of creativity or progression, right? So that, I think, was the biggest thing, and that's where somebody like a Xavi Simons obviously coming back into it when we get Matters back into it, and Decky with his hold-up play and his dribbling, obviously another player. So we'll see coming into tomorrow, the transfer window closing, what that will bring us. Hopefully that brings us another player who can like really make things happen, be kind of that key performer to take things on when the game is not going our way. There's obviously been some links still with Savinho. The latest has also been Adamo Lookman, but there's also solid reporting from Ornstein and other people saying that he might be going to Bayern now. And then there was some reporting out of Italy saying that we might be looking at Rafa Leao. So we'll see. We'll see how those reports progress and if anything actually materializes. But for now, it just, I don't know. There's still a ton to be done, because we also probably need to bring in some center back help as well. But we'll see we'll touch on all of that tomorrow. We're going to have a transfer deadline recap after everything closes and give a good overview of the squad as it is heading into the next 3 or 4 months of the season until the January window. But anyways, that's it for today. Hopefully our next game looks a lot better because we'll have some more players in, hopefully, and we'll definitely have one player in Xavi Simons, and he's going to make a huge difference, just him alone, but hopefully we have some more guys to make big impacts as well. But anyways, that's it for today. Thanks for watching. Catch you in the next one.